I think it's a pretty known fact in the anime community that animes with coming-of-age stories or animes that primarily focus on fighting and power systems tend to be the most popular. Some examples can include Dragon Ball, JJK, Hunter x Hunter, My Hero, Demon Slayer, etc. These types of animes are the most popular due to how accessible they are to watch. What I mean by this is that these animes are very action-packed and teach many important life lessons, which is why they always rule at the top. Another reason why a lot of these animes are popular is due to how compelling the antagonists are. Having characters that oppose their protagonists just demonstrate the different viewpoints. Now let's get into what this video is actually about. The true usage of time travel in animes. Everyone as a kid was always amazed at the concept of time travel the first time they heard about it. Growing up, everyone acknowledges how unrealistic the concept is, but it's still something that is always interesting to talk about. Just mentioning this concept can bring about many philosophical questions and debates. Time travel has always been such a unique concept to me, and I've always wanted to see more media involving this. After watching some animes that have had this plot element involved in the story many times, I just have to give applause and say how beautifully written it is. Some examples that I'm mentioning include ReZero, Steins Gate, Summertime Rendering, Link Click, and Erased. These 5 shows are the ones I've watched that have placed this plot element in a large majority of the story. Exploring all of the different options and seeing how these characters react to these possibilities is what makes me such a fan of time travel. Subaru, Satoru, Okabe, Shinpei, and Zhang Zhizhao. All of these characters are very different, but they all face many obstacles due to how time travel is portrayed. Time travel isn't portrayed as a happy plot element that the main character can always use to get the best results. Achieving these results always comes with suffering and agony. Subaru has to endure the constant mental breakdowns that affect him as a person every time he time travels. Satoru has to find out who killed his mother while struggling for time and fighting a psychological war with the murderer. Shinpei has to deal with these mysterious entities known as shadows that harm the people close to him and could kill everyone on the island. Okabe has to constantly face the fact that Mayuri will keep dying until he himself finds a way to prevent it. Zhang Zhizhao from Link Click always feels the trauma of the people that he looks into with his powers, which affects him as a person and how he acts. All of these characters face many obstacles along the way due to this concept of time travel, but they always find out a way to move past it and grow as a character. I'm going to be talking about each of the animes I listed one by one. So first off, I'll start at the one I most recently watched, which was Steins Gate. Out of all of the time travel animes I've seen, Steins Gate is definitely the one that incorporated the most science regarding time travel. This anime is definitely the most logical one, while the rest are just using these powers that they have. Apart from the time travel plot element, this show has a very good cast, and it feels like all of the characters actually serve a purpose. Okabe is the main character of Steins Gate, and throughout the whole show we follow his journey and how even the smallest decisions could change the whole world that he knows. Makase Kurisu is an intelligent character whose death sparked the first time travel loop. How she and Okabe interact with each other and the romance between them just provides a sense of comfort. She's also a character who helps Okabe in his decisions in every loop, even without knowing all the details, which just proves how she's grown as a character. She is basically a prodigy with potential to uncover many science-related problems. The sad truth involving her is how her controlling father always wanted her to never surpass him as a scientist. When you see her for the first time, you might think she's a character of ill-natured behavior, but you cannot be more wrong. Now let's get to another fan favorite, Mayuri. Mayuri is a fan favorite due to how she's basically the glue that holds the whole group together, and she's also someone who actually understands the emotions of other people. At first, Daru may seem like a guy whose sole purpose is to make sexual jokes and act weird, but he's an underrated character who greatly contributed to the development of the machines that were used. He's also a character who always breaks the tension and always has great chemistry with the rest of the cast. Suzuha is also another amazing character who truly cares about preventing the terrible future, and she even goes to the past to stop anything bad from happening. Now, let's talk about the series as a whole. Many people who've watched this anime have always stated how the first couple episodes were boring, but the slow build-up definitely paid off. Many people dropped this show due to it being boring, but personally, I think the show is amazing, and even the first couple episodes are still amazing. How you view whether or not the first couple episodes of this show is boring is just based on what you think. The two types of people that watch this show are those who loved the whole show from the beginning, and those who hated the beginning but still loved the show. We have to give praise to the first half of the show and how it sets up the whole time travel plot. Spoiler warning, the first time Mayuri died was getting shot by Mueka with the plot twist that no one saw coming. This event starts the chain of Okabe continuously going back in time and trying to prevent her death, even though he doesn't know how to do it. Every time Okabe undid a D-mail, Mayuri's death would be extended by 1 day, but in each timeline, it seemed like her fate was always that of death, no matter what the situation was. In terms of highest rated anime in my anime list, it's typically always in the top 3, which just goes to show how much of a fan favorite the show actually is. On other websites like IMDb, it typically falls into the top 6 to 8, which is insanely impressive. In the beginning of the series, Okabe might come off as a weird guy, but he truly has some of the best character growth I've ever seen. He's willing to do whatever it takes to save his own friends, no matter the cost. I just want to talk about how Steins Gate is a master at exploring how even the smallest decisions could affect so much and change so much. One example that I'm talking about is when Fairy sends a D-mail which changed the whole city that they once knew. Another example of this is when Urushibara sends a D-mail which ultimately swaps her gender and turns her into a female. Okabe realizes how going back and preventing the D-mails from ever happening is how he can get back the IBN and prevent a terrible future for society. Okabe himself is a very flawed character who makes mistakes, which is very understandable when you consider the fact that he's just a college student. Okabe is the kind of person who would always try to find solutions to problems that seem unfixable. It's heavily implied throughout the whole series that the main message is to never give up no matter what happens. The story shows how powerful and yet weak the human mind actually can be. One of my favorite moments in the series is when Okabe hears the future message from himself and decides to challenge fate itself. In my opinion, this message from the future is a perfect moment because it just demonstrates no matter how bad it actually can get, Okabe will always be the same scientist we know and love. Now let's get to a very popular time travel show known as Re:Zero. When you compare the time travel of Re:Zero and of Steins Gate, you just see how different the plot element can be. The time travel in Re:Zero is activated whenever Subaru, who is the main character, dies. This return by death ability granted by the Witch of Envy can be expressed either as a curse or a blessing. Re:Zero is also known as an isekai, even though it challenges the fundamental tropes of normal isekais. Other main characters in other isekais are insanely overpowered, while Subaru, he's just basically a normal person. His best chance to live is to endure many hard deaths that bring about a lot of trauma. The few amount of victories that are brought upon to this cast is not without as many hardships that Subaru has to endure. When we see these characters get a victory, the amount of joy we get is by seeing how many failures it took to finally reach this supposed perfect path. Why don't we see other characters asking Subaru how he wins all of these wars? It's because Subaru himself displays so much confidence that we all believe in him. Subaru knows himself as a troubled person who's barely holding on. Everyone else knows him as his amazing leader. Re:Zero definitely isn't known as a horror anime, but you can say that it definitely has some horror aspects about it. Just in the first couple episodes alone, we see Subaru die multiple times from this unknown lady that he doesn't know about. And we also see how he tries to prevent this tragedy so no one else dies. It would make more sense to call this show a psychological horror rather than a normal horror. There's also been many instances in which the atmosphere has felt very dark and the suspense drives the viewer crazy. When you watch this show, you just feel bad for Subaru because he endures all of this and he can't talk to a single person about it. Going back to the first arc, we see multiple times how Subaru has to face these group of thugs, and finally in the last encounter he cries for help. This cry of help attracts the man known as Reinhard. In a way, you could say that Subaru swallowed his pride and finally asked for help. Throughout the whole series, we see multiple instances in which Subaru asks for help because he knows that trying to figure out everything by himself is never going to work. In my opinion, this is what sets him apart from a lot of main characters in any anime, not just the isekai genre. One similarity I've noticed between Okabe and Subaru is that they are both roughly the same age. It's just surprising to me seeing these two teenagers having to carry the weight of the world at all times. You could say that Subaru is one of the weakest characters in terms of physical strength, but in terms of mental strength, no one comes close to him. The amount of despair and hardships that Subaru has to go through just to protect everyone else just shows what kind of a character he actually is. The amount of times he's actually seen Rem and Amelia's death would break any normal person, but Subaru knows that he has a sense of responsibility and he must keep going for those dear to his heart. Some notable moments of ReZero that are some of my favorites are when Subaru convinces Beatrice to keep living and they develop this kind of familial bond. If you've watched this show, you know that every arc of ReZero is different in its own way, and that's what makes each of them special. ReZero always has mysteries that make you curious on what happens next and you just can't stop watching. Another thing that I like about this series is how each death actually matters and isn't just a small moment thrown to the side. In the second trial of Season 2, we get to experience how the other realities are like after Subaru died. And we also get to experience how characters like Rem, and Amelia react after all of his deaths. Before any of this happened, Subaru probably thought that nothing would happen after he returned by death and everything was always going to be fine. Events like this demonstrate the nature of Subaru and how he feels guilty for leaving his loved ones behind, even if it's fake. A moment like this just lets us know how much Subaru has actually grown as a character. I'm pretty sure if Subaru from the first episode tried that trial, he would not have done it and he would have failed instantly. By embracing himself as a person with the power to rewrite realities, he knows who he is and what he has to do. Subaru is not portrayed as an intelligent character, but there have been many situations in where he has found a way to prevail, and one example would definitely be the battle against the white whale. I've only been mentioning Subaru, so I want to shift my focus towards the side characters. Rem is easily one of the best written characters in this show in my opinion. Subaru and Rem have a relationship in which they can both depend on each other when they are both struggling to stay afloat. Subaru was at his lowest many times, but Rem pulled him back from that and convinced him to keep going. Rem has always felt that her sister has been superior to her in many ways, but Subaru himself convinced her that this was not the case and that she has many good qualities that make her who she is. By allowing Subaru to be in her life, she realizes the importance of maintaining her own identity instead of always feeling like she's inferior. The relationship between Subaru and Rem is vastly different when compared to the relationship between Amelia and Subaru. But this difference is what makes Rem an amazingly written character who believes in her hero. One could say that this relationship shows how devoted Rem is to Subaru and how Subaru accepts Rem for who she is. Reinhard is a character who's easily the most powerful in the series, but this sense of power definitely comes with a massive burden on him. Some people may think of Reinhard as the average strong character, but he's someone who had this role placed onto him, and this title basically ruined his whole family. Reinhard is a character who relies on pure physical strength. Meanwhile, Subaru is the opposite, and he is a character who relies on his mental strength and his strategic plans. The villain cast is also a positive aspect of the series. Every villain that we've encountered so far in the anime has left a presence on our cast of characters. You have pure evil characters like Elsa and the Witch Cult. Then you also have complex characters like Roswald. A lot of these villains have their own motivations for what they do, which makes them very intriguing. One side character I forgot to mention was Amelia. Amelia is a character that lost her only family at a young age, which greatly affected her whole personality. The fact that she also greatly resembles the Witch of Envy doesn't help her case at all, as everyone ignores her. After Subaru proves his loyalty and love for her, she starts to become more open in the idea of meeting other people and making connections. Now let's move on to another masterpiece, which is known as Erased. This anime is pretty underrated when compared to the likes of Re:Zero and Steins Gate, but it's still an amazing series that everyone should check out if they're into a psychological murder mystery type of series. I watched the show a long time ago, so I apologize if I don't talk about it as much as I did with the other two. From what I remember, the concept of this guy trying to prevent murders while going back in time made me instantly start to watch it. The time travel aspect of this show is to show how Satoru gathers all the information he can regarding the murder of his mother and his childhood friends. Satoru is not meant to be portrayed as the perfect person that one should strive to be. He's simply another normal guy who struggles to interact with the outside world. In the first couple episodes, the main character experiences the power known as revival, and he uses this power to save a boy from dying. We can see that Satoru is truly a man with a good heart, and that with second chances, he can truly change the past. Satoru uses his second revival to save a child from being kidnapped. In his past, Satoru never truly paid much attention to this girl who got murdered, but after getting a second chance, he realizes that he must prevent whatever terrible outcome is set to happen. The difference between Satoru and every other person in his class is that he's basically an adult mind while stuck in the body of a child. This concept of him basically being an adult allows for him to strategically think of plans and find out solutions for everything that will happen. By using this power, Satoru helped Kaio in more ways than she could ever imagine. She never considered herself to be of importance and always stayed to herself. She was also from an abusive household and nobody could help her, which made her ultimately feel very hopeless. She would think that every day would be a day filled with pain, but that was all changed when the Satoru who came from the future kindled a relationship with her in order to prevent her death. One of my favorite scenes from this show is when a person named Misato accused Kaio of stealing the money from the classroom, even though she never did. This is when Satoru speaks up and shocks everyone. I think this was the moment that showed Kaio what kind of person Satoru truly was. He is basically the only person in her eyes that actually is a friend. In episode 5, we find out that Kaio disappearing is still an event that occurs, which meant that Satoru would go back into the present and worry about his current situation. Satoru is successfully able to set off this revival power once more and have one final chance to do what he couldn't do before, which was saving Kaio. Similar to Subaru and Okabe, Satoru has his own personal struggles and his own feelings of regret over not being able to save anyone. Satoru completed his own goal of saving Kaio by allowing for her to live with her grandmother, but the true threat still remained at large, which was the murderer who started all of this. The journey that Satoru goes through is very interesting to me, and it's something that made me intrigued right from the beginning. The friendship between Kaio and Satoru is what sets apart this anime from others. This friendship is not served as a way to only prevent her death, but to also prevent her abusive and lonely past. We see how all of Satoru's friends have made a good use out of their lives, even as Satoru was in a coma for many years, which showed how important his efforts actually were. The time-traveling ability in this show wasn't used as much as other shows, but it still conveyed major importance in the plot. The antagonists, which were primarily Kaio's mother and the homeroom teacher, made me realize how irredeemable some people actually can be. The connection of two timelines of Satoru at the present and also him in the past basically combine themselves to display the character arc of Satoru. So many people adore this show due to how emotional it can be at certain moments, how much it goes into some dark topics such as abuse, and also the whole mystery between finding out who the killer is while also trying to prevent everyone from dying. The ending of this show is definitely controversial for many, but I still think it's more focused on the realistic side, even though many people don't agree with how they actually handled it. Yashiro, who is the murderer, is an antagonist who is very underrated. The spider thread that is seen through his eyes indicate on who his next victims would be. Yashiro's presence alone has a big impact on the story, and I think having a pure evil villain like him makes his story more compelling with the audience. Overall, I loved Erased, and it's definitely one of my favorites. Now let's head over to another pretty well-known anime known as Link Click. The difference between Link Click and the other time travel animes is that this show was made in China. This story follows the journey of two characters known as Zheng Zhixiao and Lu Guang. Sorry if I messed that up. The powers of Zheng Zhixiao allow for him to enter photos to take over the memories and body of whoever took the photo. In some instances, even though it's considered dangerous, there's always a possibility of altering the past, which in turn changes the future. Lu Guang is able to basically become a guide for Zheng Zhixiao and direct him towards the best possible outcome without altering the past. In the first couple episodes, we follow the story of a woman named Emma, and our main characters have to extract important information out of a laptop by using her. They are able to extract this information and everything seems to be fine until the next day we discover that Emma somehow mysteriously died. This series has many cliffhangers throughout the whole series, which just makes it a show that always has you interested in what happens next. The character dynamic between the main trio and how they handle this unique concept of time travel is just very refreshing to see. We've seen so many different takes on time travel, but I would put this up there with it being one of the most special ones. The whole idea of being able to experience the emotions of the people in these photos also brings upon some sad and emotional moments that truly make you feel for the characters. This show always seems to deliver in basically every aspect, and it never lets you feel unsatisfied with every episode. Even though the main characters have this amazing power that seems to be able to fix everything and everything, there's still a lot of room for making many mistakes that could change everything, no matter how big or small. Altering the past in any way could have a lot of consequences, and I think we all know this. Another reason why this show is different compared to others is because each couple of episodes features its own mini story with its own trauma and emotional moments. Exploring themes like trauma and guilt can make this story feel relatable to viewers. The pacing of the show is another good addition to why it's very good. This show is very fast-paced and it has a lot of suspense, which makes the viewer wanting to know what could happen next. I also like how Lu Guang and Zheng Zhixiao both have different aspects to them, which makes them feel special. Lu Guang is someone who's more of a strategical guy, while Zheng Zhixiao is a person who's more focused on the emotional aspect. We get to understand how these two characters do what they can because they have each other. Having a limit of just 12 hours when entering a photo is an interesting idea because it places limitations on and shows how this cast of characters do not have an infinite amount of time to do whatever they want. Having a villain with similar abilities to the main characters is also one of my favorite things because it just shows how neither side is put at a major disadvantage. I think the real driving point of this show is all of the many stories we see within. We have a woman who misses her parents and feels relieved after seeing the food that they left at her house. We have a man who wanted to deliver 3 messages to very important people in his life before a tragedy would strike. We have a young boy who was kidnapped, and we have a friend who wanted help remembering what a guy said to her, and we had 2 friends mending a broken friendship. All of these stories just combine to create a beautiful piece of emotional storytelling. Everything about this show is just amazing, from the characters to the supernatural aspect of it, and to the feeling of it being something new, even if the concept itself isn't. Overall, this is another good masterpiece, and you should watch it just because of the character dynamic. Now, let's head over to the last and probably the most underrated one out of all of these, Summertime Rendering. I've barely heard people talk about the show, and the only time I've actually seen people talking about it was because of YouTube and Instagram Reels. When this anime first came out, it was locked because of Disney+, which makes sense on why this anime is very underrated. This show is pretty much the definition of a hidden gem. Out of all the shows I mentioned before, this one definitely had the most thrilling first episode. Just in the first episode alone, we learn about the death of Shinpei's childhood friend known as Yushio, and how she had marks on her neck which indicated a sign of murder. We also learn that the girl who was saved said that she saw another version of herself just a week prior, and we also learn about the shadow sickness. The whole concept of this sickness is that you see another version of yourself Then you get killed by it, which causes the shadow to live in your place and blend into society. Shinpei and Mio, who is the younger sister of Ushio, go to the shrine and they see a random figure in the woods. Shinpei sees the woman that he saw on the boat barely alive, so he tries to help, but she gets shot dead. Shinpei sees another version of Mio kill Mio, and then himself. At the end of this episode, Shinpei is ultimately brought back to the boat to repeat the same events. One thing I love about this anime is how many different genres are incorporated into it. You have action, romance, horror, supernatural, suspense, and mystery. Using a setting like a small town of only around 700 people is a great way to show how big the threat actually is. These shadows have a menacing presence on our characters, and this is noticed since the very beginning. The powers that Shinpei possesses allow for him to go back into a certain point in time and basically reset the whole day. But every time Shinpei dies, this starting point is basically pushed further and further ahead. You could say that this power is similar to that of Subaru from ReZero. This show is definitely not a romance, but the romance aspect between that of Shinpei and Ushio definitely make the story better. The main character and the antagonist are basically having a match between them throughout the whole story, and it could be compared to that of a chess match. Shinpei himself is a fairly intelligent character, and we can also say that for Haini and Shide. A complaint that people have is that the second half of the anime shift towards something like a shonen, and this is definitely an understandable complaint. I think if the suspense aspect was present the whole time, then I would give the show a 10 out of 10 and have it as one of my favorites. This show creates an uneasy atmosphere as you realize that anyone can be a shadow. Each time loop isn't just a way for the viewer to see Shinpei being killed. We get to see how he handles the same events but in a different way. Just hearing the concept about these monsters who basically mimic people would be enough to get any person interested. As with the other time travel animes, Shinpei experiences a lot of hard moments, but he perseveres and he finds the right path by using his knowledge from his powers. These characters have to take into account the amount of time that is given to them, or else they will lose. We get to learn how Haini is essentially the main villain of the series, and she's the mother of the shadows. Her main goal is to revive herself and to escape the feeling of being lonely. We find out at the end that Shide is the true villain the whole time, and he's also pure evil. Shide manipulated Haine, and he only cared about his own agenda and how he can accomplish it. One of my favorite moments in this series is when Shinpei is giving a speech, but he suddenly gets shot in the head and he restarts the loop once again. This moment demonstrates how the villains are essentially playing with their prey, which just makes them even more terrifying. Yuzuru was a character who actually made it possible for Shinpei to defeat these shadows due to her knowledge of them and how much of a threat she actually is. As you watch the show, you always feel like the cast is always in constant danger, which just adds to the horror element and the suspense. Using this ability of time traveling is needed, but it does come at some cost. Dying over and over would mean that he could run out of chances, and this would be fatal for everyone on the island. As we dive more into the depths of time traveling within the story, it seems like Shinpei and Haini are both developing and growing smarter within each loop. They both know that in order to win, they would have to outsmart the other person. As I've mentioned before, this show incorporates many different genres into it, which makes it a very nice anime to binge watch. Time travel is the perfect plot element in anime because a show that utilizes it and also provides a good story just makes it very nice to watch. This is my biggest video yet, and it took me a while, so I would appreciate it if you subscribed and also shared it to anyone who would be interested. Thank you.